don't do the Steven Avery was this innocent guy who, by the way, how do you accidentally throw a cat into a bonfire?
You haven't been there? You haven't done that?
Well, he said, I accidentally threw it over the fire. Okay, how did the gasoline get on the cat? Oh, I don't know. They're down there. By the way, they sound Gaelic. Okay, I have my aunt lives up in Wisconsin. They don't sound like that. This is a weird, bizarre family with a long history of crime. Not only him, his brothers, violent crime, and likely inbreeding. I mean, that family tree is a stump. And none of this is presented. Spoiler alerts. Huge spoiler alerts for Making a Murderer on Netflix. Okay, I'm going to give you 5 seconds. Not good, Jared, you've watched this, right?
You told me you were going to ruin it for me. So I binge watched about 8, 9 hours of it yesterday.
Okay, so the spoilers are done. They just screw you, don't you? The filmmakers?
They do.
You're like, oh, and you get screwed. You really feel screwed on this one because, okay, so everyone here, spoiler alert, if you're still here, right? The whole thing is an innocent man goes to jail, right, for a murder that they convinced you he did not commit and from a corrupt police force. And so you're watching the whole thing, hoping there's redemption. This guy is the sweetest, most innocent, just sort of unintelligent, but like a pussycat, right, or like a dog. Feel so bad for him when the cops are just hanging him out to dry, and then it just ends.
Yep.
With him in prison. And you feel screwed. And so I watched it, and I was really upset. And I understand. First, let me say this: yes, it does shine a light on some corruption in the judicial system. Yes, there are some bad police officers out there. Yes, there was some shady stuff that happened in this trial, and at the very least, seems like it should have been grounds for a mistrial. Okay? Yes, Brandon Dasi should not have been interrogated by himself because he is an idiot, and his lawyer, I mean, I don't know what the rule is on suing a public defendant for malpractice, but terrible all around. Okay? But my problem here is with incredibly dishonest filmmaking. And I know why this film came out at this time. It's come out at this time with the Black Lives Matter. The whole movement, it's classism, right? See, this is to prove that poor people don't get access to good legal defense, and that the system fails them, and that the cops have all the power, and how that's the goal of this. Now, like I've said, all those things I've conceded. Okay, there's some truth to that, but well, there are two things. Firstly, okay, so you can look at this and you can sign a petition, as everyone does, to free Steven Avery, and you can go, cops are corrupt and we need to change this, and this is exactly proof of Black Lives Matter, and this is just like Mike Brown and Ferguson and in Baltimore, and that's what this is. It's a parallel. And if you see things, when you watch Making a Murderer, if you see things through the prism of identity politics, right, if you see black versus white, rich versus poor, you're going to see the narrative that you want. But I see the exact opposite, okay? And you can correct me if you think that I'm wrong here, Jared. But I see the exact opposite because I look at it through the prism of truth. So comparing Steven Avery, let's assume he's innocent for a second and all of this was corrupt, but we'll get to that. Comparing Steven Avery and the prosecution to Darren Wilson and Mike Brown. What's the opposite, right? Steven Avery was convicted in a court of public opinion, and so he couldn't get a fair trial. Absolutely true, and that's just a problem with modern technology. Everyone's seen these horrific images in the news, and you're condemned before there's even a trial. Now, who was on trial with Darren Wilson? It wasn't Mike Brown. It was Darren Wilson. What happened with Officer Darren Wilson? He was tried in the court of public opinion. Hands up, don't shoot, right? We had people marching with it. It was a lie. It wasn't the truth. Darren Wilson may be a police officer, but again, it's not about police versus people. It's not about rich versus poor. It's about truth. Darren Wilson was convicted by a jury of public opinion until we found out, actually, yeah, Mike Brown he was beating the hell out of him, and he was reaching for his gun, and that's where the altercation happened, and so he was set free. So it's the opposite in that case. It's not police corruption. The real issue is the media, and people. What I've learned from this is simply wait for facts before you make a decision.
Oh, the jurors never stood a chance.
No, they never stood a chance.
Never stood a chance.
So that's how I see it. I don't see it as a Black Lives Matter, anti-police, social justice screed. I see it as we are in an era where people don't really care about truth, whether it's looking for a conviction or a false defense. So I think that's important because I know it's going to be used to push that. And I would be willing to bet that in a few years' time, it's going to be like Michael Moore. When Michael Moore came out with Roger and Me, everyone thought this guy's this brilliant filmmaker shining a light on truth. Then we find out he did get an interview with Roger, head of GM, and he just edited it out from the video, and now we know he's a partisan hack. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens with these filmmakers. 10 years down the line, we'll be going, yeah, they were great when they did Making a Murderer, and we had no idea that they were a part of Greenpeace, that kind of thing. So that's the first deal. After watching it, because it was so screwed, I thought there's got to be more than this. I felt manipulated because anybody watching this would say, okay, this is mistrial. There's no way. But then I go, well, how does an entire jury find him guilty? And then how are all of his motions for, appeals, all of his post-trial motions denied. And why did the judge go out of his way to condemn him personally? And why did everyone in the town really hate and fear them?
They never really tapped into any kind of motive questions for anything. Either why he did the murder, they never really asked a motive like what kind of motive did he have. They never really tapped into what kind of motive did the police department really have other than the money that they owed him. That was it.
Right, that was it.
No motive.
So when I watch it, I go, well, how is they must not be seeing what I'm seeing. So having said all of that, my problem is with dishonest filmmaking. And guess what? There's a lot that you missed on Making a Murderer. Steven Avery is likely guilty. Doesn't mean this wasn't wrong, and it should be a mistrial. This guy's a murderer, most likely, who should go free according to our legal system because of tampering with evidence. But a few things. So let me just kind of, and one thing I know, some of these are sort of, one thing I find the most telling is that they talk about Ken Kratz. Ken Kratz, the prosecuting attorney, in the film, they talk about him having the sexting scandal later in the film.
Which really had nothing to do with anything.
Had nothing to do with anything. What do they not mention? Steven Avery talked about creating a sex torture chamber. Brandon Dasi said he was molested by Steven Avery. These are alleged. Steven Avery doused a cat in gasoline and burned it alive in a bonfire.
The family cat.
The family cat. Yeah, and for him, he says that was
another mistake I did. I had a bunch of friends over who were fooling around with the cat. And I don't know, they were kind of negative on it. I tossed him over the fire and he lit up.
Okay, so they skim over that. Why? Because the filmmakers were honest, right? They want to indict the character of the cops and the prosecuting attorneys, but they want you to see Steven Avery as, no, he dunked his cat in gasoline and threw it in a bonfire, okay? This was proven. The guy did...
A live cat.
Live cat, okay? Most people would hear that right away and want to watch this guy burn. So that's my problem as a dishonest filmmaker. So that happened. What other past criminal activity? Threatening a female relative at gunpoint. In the months leading up to Halbach's disappearance, Avery had called Auto Trader several times, specifically asking for Teresa Halbach. And she said she was uncomfortable because he would answer and make sexual advances, answering in only a towel. The day that Teresa Halbach disappeared, he had called 3 times, twice from a disguised number. The bullet, which you don't see in the film, the bullet with her DNA on it had come from Avery's gun, which always hung above his mantelpiece. Her BlackBerry, her phone, was found in his burn bin. The one thing that is really damning to me that they don't share with you is Brandon Dasi, right? Absolutely should not have been interrogated without his parents present. But what they don't show you, there's a 21-page transcript, is that he gave information at that point that led to more evidence discovery that they couldn't have done without his testimony, like DNA under the latch of the hood. Non-blood DNA, so it couldn't have come from the vial. And that was presented in the trial and withheld. So there's a lot of other information that was presented in the trial that was withheld, let alone all of this sort of, I guess you'd call it, auxiliary information. So you watch it and you think, here's an innocent guy who's a pussycat who couldn't hurt a fly when he had hurt many people. I mean, masturbating in front of his cousin or the sheriff's daughter, I think it was something he did, committed crimes, ran a relative or friend of the sheriff's off the road. This is a guy who was causing problems for a long, long time. We know he did time for robbing a bar, going in and stealing their money, vandalism. This is not an innocent. None of that is really shown. It's skimmed over. So my issue is with manipulative filmmaking. You'll have everyone going out there, probably signing a petition.
There's lots of petitions going on.
Well, this happened with Tukey Williams, right? Tukey Williams killed 4 different people in 3 different incidents when he started the. It was the Bloods or the Crips, and he refused to ever testify against other people who had killed people's sons and daughters. But he wrote a children's book about avoiding gang violence. So it was like, oh, it's time to free him. No, it's not time to free him. So are there a lot of things that went wrong? Yes. And were the cops corrupt? Absolutely. And I think there were problems. What I think was very likely, and the reason every single person was quick to convict and all of his motions were denied, is this was a very violent sociopath with a long history of criminal activity who had hurt a lot of people, and he likely did the murder, and the police wanted to really make it stick. And so they lied. They did some things that's my opinion. There are other opinions circulating. That's my opinion. What's not an opinion is this is a violent criminal with a long history, regardless of this. Now, does that mean a wrongful conviction is right? Absolutely not. My point is, don't drink all the Kool-Aid. Don't do the hands up, don't shoot. Don't do the Mike Brown was a 14-year-old kid with a little baby face, right? Don't do the Trayvon Martin was a kid who had never caused any problems and wasn't getting high on purple drink. Don't do the Steven Avery was this innocent guy who, by the way, how do you accidentally throw a cat into a bonfire?
You haven't been there? You had done that?
Well, he said, I accidentally threw it over the fire. Okay, how did the gasoline get on the cat? Oh, I don't know. They're down there. By the way, they sound Gaelic. Okay, I have my aunt lives up in Wisconsin. They don't sound like that. This is a weird, bizarre family with a long history of crime. Not only him, his brothers, violent crime, and likely inbreeding. I mean, that family tree is a stump. And none of this is presented. I'm not saying that... Now, the takeaway here, social justice warriors, should absolutely be that we should have a healthy fear of the state. Because this is a state abusing its power to go after someone who was likely guilty, but they could probably do it to someone who's not. So think about that when you and Barack Obama, as he's done this week, argues that the only people who should have efficient weaponry are police officers. Everything about this special, Making a Murderer, if you watch it, again, if you see it through the lens of class warfare and identity politics, you'll set the narrative black versus white, poor versus rich, cops versus everyone else. If you simply look at it through the prism of truth, what's the truth here? You can't see it as anything other than entirely substantiating a conservative point of view. Healthy fear of the state, waiting for facts and information before you make a judgment, and believing in the judicial system, or making sure that you expose it when it's corrupt. That is, I mean, you say libertarian, I guess. Libertarian, conservative. There's no way to watch this and be a social justice warrior, Black Lives Matter, feminist, authoritarian. So that was my point. Now, in that case, Jared, you can tell me what you think when you watched it. Am I off base? But my blood was just boiling.
No, I don't think you are. I think... I'm still processing all of it because I, just binge watched it yesterday. But
by the way, we have Steven Avery calling us from
you told me that this morning
after the break.
I didn't know about that.
Yeah.
So that could be interesting. But yeah, I did. You definitely feel very manipulated watching it all the way through. That's kind of the agenda of the film, and I don't really know anything about the filmmakers at all. I mean, other than Netflix.
Right.
I don't really know. They don't really come out and say who they are and what their agenda is. They just kind of, feed you information as they see fit. But
did you kind of feel that's the angle they were playing?
Oh yeah. And I mean, to their credit, they did a really good job with.
Did a great job
with it. They kind of went back and forth. You kind of like, oh, I think he's guilty. I think he's not. Through 10 episodes, you kind of toss and turn with it until the end, and you're like,
yeah.
They kind of leave. They really leave you with that sort of like, I need to go sign a petition.
We have to go to a break, and Steven Avery is going to be calling us from prison next.
Yep.
If people are watching this, they're terrestrially. This will be up online at louderwithcrowder.com. The phone call with Steven Avery from prison. It's an exclusive. Louder with Crowder. Stay tuned. Hey, if you like this video, subscribe by clicking my face or this button, or watch one of these other videos. If you're offended, you should leave.